Not quite.
Waiting for speed.
Not quite. You'll get us
Change
in.
our lighting, Bill, change the shirt. Speed, all right.
Yeah, right, fellas.
Okay,
Yeah,
Claire.
that's better.
Well, Bill Murray, it's really a delight to sit and talk to you. Now, I saw your movie last night, Stripes, and enjoyed it very much. Stripes gives us good old Army humor. Did you research for that? Well, how did you get the feel of being in the Army so well and playing John Winger?
Well, we went to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and we stood outside in formation in the cold for 6 to 12 hours a day, and that sort of gave us the feeling of it. We ate bad food, you know, just all the things. No, it was, I don't know, it was just, I think that really that we all have a common Army experience just from seeing all the Army movies. I mean, we all know who's who, and we all know why it is the way it is just from seeing, you know, Pork Chop Hill and
Yeah.
MASH and everything else.
Well, it was so. I was curious. I wondered how Sergeant Bilko. Do you remember Sergeant Bilko?
Yes.
How would he fit into your Army stripes?
I
Have
think he
been
would have
many
gotten
changes?
second billing. No, I don't know. He was Bilko, sure, I mean, I watched Bilko as a kid all the way. And his is it's very similar in a way because they played it straight. They played the serious aspects of the Army, and they were goofy, but they always got stuck up against the serious aspects of it.
The Army hasn't changed all that much over these years, has it?
Well, they still got those ugly uniforms, you know, which
Yeah.
are very fashionable nowadays, so I guess tastes change.
And
you
the
know.
ugly sergeants.
There are some homely ones, really homely ones, but they're dressing better, and they're getting better haircuts.
You know, Bill, it's very interesting to me. Your audience for Saturday Night Live thought of you as a comedian, and Meatballs and Stripes establish you as a star and an actor. Would you think of going into serious drama?
Well, I would think about it, but I'm sure there'd be big trouble ahead for me. Once they find out I'm just a cheap actor like everybody else, that would be it. You know, I spent a lot of time fooling people about this whole acting thing. But serious drama would be fun to do, but I don't know, I'd probably...
You had your roots, of course, in comedy.
Well, my roots were in the terror and fear of growing up in a large family. I've got kind of an Anne Frank history, and I don't know, I lived in a small room for many years as a child, and but I started at the Second City in Chicago, and that's, you know, people think it's a funny theater, a comedy theater, because they do a lot of comedy stuff, but you learn you learn how to do a lot of things. It's really the ultimate training ground.
It is a great training ground, and being the fifth of 9 children is a great training ground for survival.
Yes.
And you were a medical student.
Yes, well, after I saved a few lives, I said, no big deal, you know, and I figured this comedy thing would work better for me, you know, just in terms of my development as a spirit, you know.
Well, saving more lives, you'd be surprised how helpful comedy can be to get you through many people, to get them through the long, cold days ahead. And comedy has traditionally been at the expense of social customs and restrictions. We're in a permissive era. Do you find it harder to make people laugh?
Well, when they're running around naked drinking wine, it's hard to get their attention, you know, it's so difficult.
Well, that's kind of serious. I mean, that's true.
Yeah, well, no, it's not, well, they're just, things always change. There's always something funny. There's always something social that's different. In this instance, we went after the new Army, you know, what the new Army represents, or what it means to somebody in the 80s, you know, to go into the Army. It's not a very fashionable idea. It's almost an accident to get in the Army nowadays. There's no, you know, it's not so normal as it once was. There's no draft, and it doesn't mean the same things it used to mean. And it's portrayed as being something very different, where you know, learn how to work lasers and stuff like that. But it still comes down to sit-ups and push-ups, as far as I'm concerned, in cold weather. To me, will always be the Army. Is freezing to death in Fort Knox.
But it is interesting that fellas today and girls today, they have unemployment insurance and a type of security without having to join the Army. But then all of a sudden, this character that you portray decided that he would join the Army because he felt that it might motivate him.
Yeah, he needed some discipline in his life, some sort of discipline. This character is a guy who has always taken the path of least resistance and who's basically slid through life, and at a certain point realizes that he hasn't really profited too much by taking the easy way out, so he, monk-like, decides to go into the army and be beaten around and see what happens when he tries to find out who he really is, change himself.
And it's fascinating to watch the development and indeed the way he changes. And it must have been interesting for you. Is there any of you in that character of John Winger?
Well, you remember the scene where I had a lot of trouble doing the push-ups?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's me. That's me. And yeah, there's a lot of me in John Winger. You know, a guy, a smart aleck. You know, a wise guy, who you know, sort of pushes authority and tries to always push a little further than normal.
Do films do anything for you in terms of development yourself, personal development? Do you go into a film and then come out a slightly different person?
Definitely. You go into a film and you spend you know, 3 months with about 50 people, and you get to know those people a lot, and you get to see them. You get to see yourself by seeing them in the same sort of pressure situations that you're in. You see how people respond to it, and you see how you figure into it. It also is a humbling experience when you realize that any one of these 50 guys doesn't do their thing right, and you're worthless, you know, and that they're as important as you are, and that there's no, you know, you can't flex your muscles too much, otherwise something breaks down and the whole thing falls apart. It's interesting to see how many people you think you're the big creative bozo, and it turns out there are a lot of creative bozos who are, you know, can make you look bad. Like these men have spent hours setting these lights up like this. But if they had put, you know, just black paper instead of white, you know, we'd be in big trouble.
You could look absolutely horrible.
Yeah, if I hadn't told them not to put that black paper up there, you wouldn't look as good as you do, and me neither. But it's like that. Movies have a lot of people between the idea and the finished product, and so you have to really be sure about what you're doing, because if you're fuzzy in any way, it won't pass through the filters quite as you want it.
Was that also true of Saturday Night Live? Was that true of Second City?
Well, Second City was basically, the nice thing about Second City is you're performing live in front of people who are drinking. So, you know, you're way ahead of the game right away. These are people who would pretty much laugh if you know, unbutton your shirt, because they're just smashed on Singapore slings. But no, that's a stage with no props, with just a couple props and chairs, and there's nothing that can go wrong there. The lights are pretty much like schoolroom lights. It's not a highly technical thing. Mm-hmm. The technical aspect of Second City is in the acting and the improvisation. In Saturday Night Live, it was much more complicated, but it was still live, and it had an audience, and it had that built-in rhythm. In film, there's no real response like there is in those mediums, and you have to find your rhythm without the laughter. You have to find your rhythm. There's all these people I talked about, and you don't have that same response. TV had some restrictions, you know. You had to be in the right place for the camera to hit you.
But at least when you said something, you could see the immediate reaction.
Oh yeah,
of where
well, as an
your time
audience,
is.
you know, you get a big wah wah, you know, big honk laugh, and then you sort of know that you're being heard and understood. You know, in a movie, you don't know if you're being heard loud enough. You're in a scene with a lot of noise, and you don't know what it sounds like, because there's a guy, you know, 50 feet away going like that. Sort of like he's doing right here. He's drifting asleep with these headphones on. He doesn't know what's going on. We propped him up during lunch, and he's back now, but he'll probably fall asleep again in just a few minutes.
But we have an audience out there that's, I guarantee you, hanging on to your every word as I am. And I want to thank you very much for your generosity, and I'm sure you've had a really tough day.
Claire, I hope you
Thank
put
you.
that check to good use. I really do.
Thank you. Thanks very much.